You ever played this kind of music? Have you heard this? You have? Would this be disco?
Yeah.
That would be disco? Hold on, listen.
Yeah, it's it's electronica though.
Yeah, it is electronic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way they could sell it to you cheap.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a bunch of musicians doing it, which I'm sure you love. Jay EuDaly is sitting across from me, and there was a kid that I used to drive to Montessori school when he was 4 years old, and my daughter and him sat in the back seat when I drove them back and forth to Montessori school. And he's a musician, a percussion teacher, major, and he said, "You got to talk to Jay EuDaly. You got to talk to him." And I said, "Well, we're friends on Facebook. I'm not even sure how that happened because I'm not sure."
I don't know.
How we met each other, and then I started talking to you the other day. We sat in the infamous Winstead's hamburger joint in Kansas City, talked for an hour and a half. And Jay, I got to tell you, man, I was blown away.
Oh, well.
And his wife is sitting here. Jan, your eyebrows just went up. Really, Jay?
Yeah, she has to live with it.
Well, here's what got me about talking to you, and I'm going to put comics as a comedian and a musician, and it's so refreshing to hear principles over ego. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm not sure if that's synonymous with musicians, but I know it is with comedians. It's my ego is way above my principles because I got to be a star. I got to do this.
Right.
But as a musician, you had a moment of clarity. So, Jay, let's just jump to it. What was your moment of clarity? If you give us a little history, how you got up to that.
My moment of clarity was sometime probably in 1985. And I'd been leading a band and playing full-time 6 nights a week. I was on the road about half the time. And I was on stage right before a 4-hour gig, waiting for the curtain to go up. And I had a little flash go through my head that said, "What am I doing here? I hate this." And then the next thought was, wait a minute, I used to love this. What happened?
Were you in town or out of town when this happened?
This was in town.
Okay.
And I couldn't answer that question right away. I had to think about it for a while. But I realized that I hadn't been happy for quite a while.
Jay, how long have you been in the music business professionally when you were playing and making your money as a musician at that point?
Probably about 10 years.
Okay, so you were well into it.
I mean, full time.
You were well into it.
Yes. Yeah, I was leading a band, had a contract with a booking agent that he sent me all over the country. He was the national entertainment director for the Gilbert Robinson Corporation.
Sure, GR here in town, you bet.
So any establishment that had live music anywhere in the country, he booked it.
Gotcha.
So I was doing that.
What kind of music?
It was just top 40 cover dance music. There was a lot of dance clubs,
Sure.
You could work 6 nights a week pretty easy if you were...
You may have said this, I'm sorry, I didn't know. What year was it about? Do you remember?
85.
85, okay, right.
But I'd been doing that since the late 70s.
Gotcha. Okay, so you, I hate this, but I used to love it.
Right. So I thought about it for a while and realized there were two aspects to that. One was things weren't real great at home, and we had 2 or 3 kids at that time under 5.
Wife is
3
putting
kids.
up. Janice said 3.
3 kids under 5.
Jan is the ombudsman here today. She is keeping the facts straight.
She'll correct me. And I was gone a lot. I was gone half the time, basically. I was gone in, 2 or 3 week increments.
Yeah.
I'd be out of town for a couple weeks and in town for a week or 2 and then out for a week and then in for 3 and then out for 2 and that kind of thing. So she wasn't happy, and I could see the kids, some issues with the kids that were due to absent father.
Gotcha.
That's part of it. The other part was I realized that I hated everything about the music business except just playing the stupid guitar. And because I was a band leader, the guitar playing was on automatic pilot, and I was thinking about everything else. I was thinking about the interband politics and the extra band politics, you know, the club owner, the booking agent.
All the logistics.
The room assignments, keeping the van maintained to get to the next town.
So you're up there playing dance music, and all this stuff is going through your head while you're playing.
I'm on stage every night thinking about, you know, is the volume right? Is the set list right? Are we too loud for the people eating? Are we not loud enough for the people dancing?
Now, Jay, while you're on there doing that, are you also thinking about, I have a wife and 3 kids back home?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The road work became excruciating after I got married and having children. It was very depressing. It was traumatic. We'd do a week stand at the same club. Mm-hmm. So you're either living in a hotel or a band house, and you got nothing to do during the day. And, you know, I'd go out to the mall, the local mall, and go to the movie or whatever. And all I could see were kids at the mall that were the same age as my kids.
Wow.
You know, so I wasn't happy being on the road that much.
If we could just put a pause button here, Steak, we'll come back to this. Mm-hmm. I think it's important for the people to know, because I've talked to you, have a little bit of a story here about you. You came from a very strong family.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
yeah, so both of us are from.
So that was really
families.
Inbred in both of you, a strong family.
Yes.
And then here you are not. Now you're not with your family.
Right.
But is it because you were the breadwinner, if you will? You had to make the money to support your family.
Yeah, yeah. She worked for several years after we first got married, but after the 3rd kid came along, she decided to quit her job and homeschool.
So your kids are homeschooled?
Yes, all my kids are homeschooled.
Your kids are homeschooled, and now your kids who grew up and have families, they are homeschooling their kids.
Yeah, I think as far as I know, all my grandkids are homeschooled, the ones that are old enough.
Okay, so why did you decide to homeschool?
The main reason was we decided that time with Dad was more important than going to school. And even when I was in town, I would be gigging every night.
Right.
And if the kids were in school during the day,
I wouldn't see them.
Basically seeing them on the weekends,
sure.
You know. And so the fact that they were homeschooled meant that I could spend time during the day, you know, with the kids. And we were part of support groups that did activities and stuff, and I would go with the kids to, you know, they'd have field trips to fire stations and museums and things like that.
Yeah.
You know? And I would teach music to some of them, and another friend would teach art, you know. So
nice. So you're on the road when this moment of clarity happened, and how long after that moment of clarity happened did you said, you know, I'm taking my chips off the table, I'm done playing? On the road.
It took a little while. It took maybe a year to get the ducks lined up. I had to figure out some way to stay local and still make a living with the guitar.
And at this time when you were doing this, did you let your wife Jan? You let her know this is the plan. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, we were both. Yeah,
she knew what was happening.
Yeah, I started teaching. I decided that the teaching was the route to go, private teaching, and it took a while to accumulate a student load that was large enough to give me the courage to stop, to give the band notice, and stop and get out of my contract with the agent,
and also make sure you have enough money coming in that you have the same money with the band.
Right.
I mean, because you have to be a responsible dad.
So after that point, the teaching and ever since then, the teaching has been the bread and butter. I still gig a lot, but it's all local.
Yeah. I remember we talked, I thought this was really cool. You said, I have two great loves in my life in this order. One is my family. The second is having a guitar in my hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said that's it.
Yeah.
As long as you have a guitar in your hand, you really don't care where you are. As long as you're playing.
Yeah. I'm lucky in that way, I think, because there's a lot of guitar players that, great guitar players, but they hate teaching. And they're not very good at teaching because they hate it.
Yeah.
This pandemic shutdown has been interesting because I've fielded some calls from established players who all of a sudden have no gigs, and they're dipping into the teaching waters, and they're calling me for advice on how to solicit students, what kind of content to teach,
Sure.
How do you...
And they think you're going to give them an answer.
Yeah.
So tomorrow they could start and have all the students and have all the content. Yeah, comics do the same thing. I got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to commit to it. Things are changing a little bit as I've gotten older and a little more comfortable financially. But, since I started teaching, I would turn down gigs because it conflicted with the student.
Oh, nice. There's that principle coming in more.
Well,
than
yeah.
ego
I mean,
again,
it was not just principle. It was, where's the bulk of my money coming from? I mean, we're talking self-interest here.
That's honest. Oh, darn it. I thought it was such a great story. No, I care about the children. No, you do, but I got to have the money coming in, man.
And I'm going to cancel $250 worth of students to make $100 on this gig.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I had to have more than just money. I have to have more reasons than just money to cancel students to play a gig. There has to be some other factors involved.
Gotcha.
I mean, I do it.
Yeah.
But the default is I don't cancel students to play a gig.
Gotcha. Now, when you started, because you were talking about the musicians that they didn't really care about teaching, but they did it out of necessity. When you started teaching, I mean, I'm asking to be brutally honest here if you want to share that. Were you into teaching? Did you, or were you into it because I got to do this?
It started out. It's just something I need to do. I got to do this. This will get me off the road.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And
it's just a strong motivator.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I want to save my family here. I want to save my marriage. I want to save.
Sure.
The thought that I had about all that was the music is not a person. The music will never know if I don't play it, but my kids will be screwed up for life if I don't change something.
Wow. Now, that's a pretty deep embedded family value. Let's talk about your family, if you don't mind, because you grew up in the Midwest. You grew up around here?
Yeah, I was born in Indiana.
Okay.
I lived in Indiana, a very small hick town in southern Indiana until I was about 10.
Now, how many people were in the town?
At that time, maybe, I'm just guessing here. We're talking 60s, early to mid 60s, maybe 6,000.
So are we talking Mayberry?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're talking about where everybody knew each other.
Yeah.
And all the parents knew you.
Yeah.
And knew your...
The town was about 3 miles long. We, walked to school, walked to church, walked.
Yeah.
I had... when I was a little kid, I took piano lessons at the local Catholic church from a nun there, and I walked, to my piano lesson. You could get anywhere in the town on foot, pretty much.
Any bikes? Do you have a bicycle?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do that too. So, and mom and dad, you had a mom and dad. How many brothers and sisters?
I have 3 brothers. I'm the oldest of 4.
Okay, so 4 boys and strong family and grandparents.
Yes.
And you spent a lot of time around grandparents.
They lived in a different town. I was, I think I would see my grandparents, 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. And then there would be times where we would stay there. We'd stay at the grandparents for a week.
Yeah.
Mom and Dad were on a trip, or Mom had a baby, and they would farm out the kids for a week.
Sure.
While the first week the newborn was at home,
Sure.
that kind of thing. But I feel like that I knew my grandparents pretty well.
Do you? We didn't talk about this, and I'm putting you on the spot here, which I love to do.
That's
by
fine.
The way. that is. What did you glean from in your grandparents? Is there any values you think right now, Jay, that you took away from your grandparents?
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with how functional or dysfunctional the families are. Okay,
Because all families are both.
Yes, yeah. One set of grandparents was pretty dysfunctional,
Yeah.
and the other set wasn't. But and as a kid, I didn't think anything about that. It was like, well, this set of grandparents is this way, and this set of grandparents is that way. It's just the way they are.
Sure.
There was no trauma associated with it, but I think there's a lot of value to it. I feel like that I have a pretty strong sense of self and a sense of well-being.
From your grandparents?
Well, just from intact family in general, knowing where you come from, knowing where you fit, It's hard to define, and that is especially true with great-grandparents, because I knew 5 of my great-grandparents at one point.
Talked to them, spent time with them?
Yep. And one of those great-grandparents lived long enough to meet my wife and meet my oldest daughter.
Wow.
So it was his great-great-grandchild.
Wow.
We got a 5-generation picture. And, he was born in the 1880s. 1884, I think, was when he was born. And he was, I spent a lot of time talking to him. I saw him at least once a year the whole time I was growing up.
What's a memory you have of that with spending time with your great-grandpa?
The way he'd kill chickens.
Okay, how'd he do that?
He'd grab them by the head and just flick his wrist and break their neck.
So he was a farmer.
He was a retired railroad worker. He'd been retired longer than I was alive.
Wow.
I think he retired in 1952, but he was a steam engine mechanic.
Wow.
And he had a job all through the Great Depression because he worked for the railroad,
Sure.
And but the story is the day that he retired, I think he retired in 52. He bought a brand new John Deere tractor, and he farmed about 40 acres of corn and raised pigs.
Now,
The whole time I was a child, we had family reunion on Thanksgiving Day at his farm every year.
and good food.
Fresh chicken.
Did he ever teach you how to do that with the chicken?
I never did it.
Did you ever want to do it? You just
No,
watched-
I didn't want to do it. He also had a functioning well right outside the kitchen.
Freshwater well.
From the old days when there was no indoor plumbing.
Wow. So you got to be a part of this, feel it, see it, hang out with them.
Yeah, and that, I think that instills it's a healthy thing psychologically and emotionally for a child.
Because?
Because you know who you are, you know where you come from, you know where you fit.
Is there a sense of comfort in there, a sense of knowing you can go to people, be around them?
Yeah.
And while you're on the road as a musician, you realize my boys and my wife especially,
right,
they're all missing out on all
right.
this. And you are missing out on it as well.
Right. Yeah, it's just it's not good. It's almost impossible to have a healthy marriage and raise kids when you're on the road all the time. You just can't do it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I can relate to that personally myself.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
Because what's interesting as a musician, as a comedian, and I don't know if this works with you, when you're home, you're thinking about, well, I got to go back out there and work and make money.
Right.
And when you're out there working, making money, you go, oh, I should be back home.
Yeah.
So you're never really comfortable in one place.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
The tension, but it's not just in the arts. I mean, it's any job. The tension between the job and home, that's true for almost everyone.
Sure.
To some degree or another, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's a very safe and fair thing to say.
Yeah.
So if you get
it just maybe in our case, because of what we do, it's a little more stark.
Sure. So if you're a musician, let's switch over to but I'm not gonna promise you we're not getting back to the family stuff. The fun thing about me, I'm like a remote control. We'll switch to talk about different things. But if you get a musician who doesn't have a good family life, that isn't married, then they have that, I'm not sure if luxury is a correct word, but you're on the road, man, you can be married to the road. You can be married to the band. You can be married to the music.
Yeah.
You could be just married to the gigging because you don't have that urgency to get back home to do that.
Right.
And would you say some of the most successful musicians are because of that? Is that a safe thing to say?
I think there's definitely correlation.
Well, you know, let me correct that, Jay, if I could, because success is all in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
You are a success because you have made your living as a musician.
Hey, I have my own definition of what success is.
Sure.
Sure. And it depends on how you define success.
Yeah. So
I mean, when you're a millionaire and world famous as a musician, but you've left a trail of human debris in your wake, what kind of success is that?
That's a great point, man. That's why I like talking to you. I mean, that's what I said about putting principles above ego, because you are married. You want that. You want the Grammys. You want the all the accolades.
Right.
You want the albums. And you don't care how you get there.
Right.
And I think that's true in any profession, like you said.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. But you can also concentrate as a musician on the road, where you're just constantly involved with the music.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But, I'm totally, she'll tell you, I'm totally involved with the music anyway.
Yeah. We just gotta. I wish we had a camera in here, Chad.
She's convinced, and my daughters are too, that I'm on the spectrum.
Explain.
Well, I'm one of my daughters is totally convinced that I am. I have what's the word? Asperger's syndrome.
Your daughter think you have Asperger's syndrome because?
Yeah, I have Asperger's. I'm a high-functioning autistic.
Because?
Because I have a single-purpose aspect to my personality. I'm only interested in one thing. I only think about one thing, and I'm into it way deep, and I don't care about anything else. In other words, I don't have hobbies.
But is she referring to just the music?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I'm constantly, I live in my head.
Well, yeah, yeah,
And,
I can relate to that.
And I also have some other, when I looked it up, and looked at it, I go, man, that's pretty.
Pretty accurate?
Yeah, there are other attributes or symptoms or aspects of a high-functioning autistic that I have. I have sensitive skin, and I wear all my underwear inside out because I can't stand the seams.
Isn't that just known? That's a reveal I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, a little TMI maybe.
For those scoring at home, too much information.
But
no, that's great stuff though. That makes you you.
And I think anybody that especially that does something like what we do, it requires a single-minded focus.
Absolutely, I was just going to get to that. You're right.
Yeah, and a lot of my students, I tell them, I'll have a student and I'll teach them for a while, and one day they'll come in and they'll say, "Man, I'm going to quit my lessons because I I don't have the time. I just don't think I can devote the time that I need to get to where I want to be with this.
Yeah.
Because I have this going on and I do this and I do that, and I can't spend the time that I need to get this to the level that I want. And I say, well, I understand. Congratulations on being a reasonably well-balanced individual.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to get really good, you can't be balanced. You have to devote huge amount of resources to, getting to a level where it's viable.
And and take that not just in music or comedy. Take that as a stockbroker.
Yeah.
You have to be in it all the time
Right.
to be at the top of your game to do that.
Yeah. So that syndrome of intense focus on a single thing, that runs in my family.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's pretty obvious.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Are you talking about your brothers? Are you talking about your kids
and
or both?
My dad is kind of that way. The object of the focus could be anything.
I wish people could see Jan's face as you're talking about. Andrea, and you're letting me call you Jan all this time? Oh, do I feel like a jerk? Start the podcast over again, Andrea. How did I get from Andrea to Jan? And even you didn't correct me, man.
No, I didn't catch it. I have impaired hearing from playing loud rock music for 20 years. That's another thing she's having to live with at this later stage of our life. Hearing aids are inevitable for me.
And so it's Andrea,
right?
Not Jan. But I got to tell you, now it's...
You conflated Jay and Andrea.
That's right. I did. You're absolutely right. Because you're single-focused, Jay.
Yeah.
You understand. I got to tell you, Andrea, by me messing up your name and doing that just made this podcast better.
A true jazz attitude.
Yeah. Well, we messed it up, but I got a better lick out of it. And for me, I got a better line out of it.
Right. That's a comedian talking.
That's
man.
it. So your dad is focused that way too. And when I said that, Andrea just said,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm sure Jan was here; she would have said that too. Whoever the hell Jan is.
So anyway, at a really young age, I recognized that trait in myself.
I'm writing her name down, pardon me.
Yeah.
So no.
I recognized that trait in myself, which later came to be called autism.
Isn't that odd that they slap a label on it instead of going, I'm just single focused.
Right.
All I want to play is music.
Yeah, I never considered it a disability. I considered it something that needed to be managed in a positive way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I applied it to the guitar. And I go, if I can use this ability, I considered it an ability, not a disability.
Nice.
It was an ability. I can use this to become a really good guitar player.
Now, but you weren't consciously thinking about that while you're playing the guitar, were you?
Actually,
you were just into playing it.
I was conscious of that pretty early on.
Were you?
Yeah, and I was consciously aware that it needed to be managed. If it wasn't managed, it would wreck my life.
Wow. That's incredible insight. How old were you at the time?
A teenager, middle teens.
There's adults that get to be in their 50s and 60s.
I've seen that.
That finally get to that point to go, maybe I need to do something about that.
Yeah.
And here you are a teen and you're managing that.
Yeah.
Asperger's good.
High functioning autistic.
Good.
Cool. It has, she's constantly yanking me back into the world.
Andrea is.
Yeah. Yeah, she's constantly saying, hey, your daughter is talking to you. You need to pay attention.
Now, is that because of the hearing or just because you're so full?
No, it's not just because of the hearing. The hearing problem doesn't help.
Okay.
But no, that's her counterbalance.
Because you're focused on that.
Yeah, because I'm in my head thinking about the chord changes to, Donna Lee or something, and one of my kids is trying to get my attention.
Yeah.
So.
Say, as soon as you tell me the chord changes to Donna Lee, I'll talk to you. Tell that to your kid. Go figure out the chord changes I'm working on. Figure that out. I'll talk to you.
No, it's not that bad.
Of course. It's interesting, Jay, what you're saying is because where I come from, I'm in my head and I can relate to exactly what you're saying. I'll be talking to somebody, maybe it's a dinner or something, and I'm thinking about, man, in the story I'm writing, if I would put that character over here and do that here, that's going to make it. And in the last 45 seconds, I don't have a clue what they just said.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah. I understand that focus. Yeah. But that's the only way you get good, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or better, at the level of excellence.
Yeah.
Or so we justify that to ourselves instead of being incredibly selfish, narcissistic people.
Yeah. There is an element of narcissism that also has to be managed.
But it's interesting. I didn't know we're talking about this.
I actually think I'm good enough that people will pay money to come and hear me play.
Yeah, you better think. You better think that.
Yeah. How could you do what we do without having that attitude?
Is that narcissism, or wouldn't you just call that confidence?
There's a fine line, isn't there, between self-confidence and egocentrism?
Well, I had no idea we'd talk about this, but this is fascinating. Maybe we need to get your daughter here to help us with this too. But because, as I understand, narcissism is doing what you want without any concern what other people are doing. It's all about yourself. Whereas you have the confidence to do that. I have the confidence to do that, but I'm aware I remember I got this incredible job here in town opening for Celine Dion and at the Kemper because her opening act was sick and couldn't do it. And so, 2.5 hours before, I'm making dinner for my daughter.
Right.
And this lady I was dating go, "You're making dinner before you were," and I, Celine, yeah. That's what you do.
Right.
As a comedian, that's what I do, but that's not who I am. I'm a dad first. I do that stuff, and then I'll go do that because that pays the bills. So to me, I'm just jamming here, but I'm guessing narcissists would go, "You eat what you want. Dad's got to go open for Celine."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get the distinction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I'm not arguing with you. I just like to, I always like to discuss this stuff, because, I sort of believe that words have meaning and we should stick with them accurately, what words mean and their definition rather than just making up something. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
This is about you, not me, not my little diatribe here. Sorry about that.
Maybe I would use the term narcissism in kind of a sarcastic
Gotcha.
mode.
Well, I brought it up first. I know that, so I take full responsibility for somebody who can't remember somebody's name sitting right in front of them. So now that we got that worked out, you continue to play.
Yes.
You've never stopped the entire time. You figured out a way to play in town.
Yeah.
And there's a great blues joint here in town called BB's Lawnside Barbecue.
Yeah, and I actually think that we met there.
Could have been
several years ago.
Yeah, because I frequent the joint.
Yeah. So I think that we did actually meet there. Maybe I just saw you there and didn't meet you, but I can't remember.
Yeah,
exactly.
Now, but you've been there for 25 years?
Well, we've been at BB's, I don't know how long, maybe 10 years, but that gig has been going on since 84, and it's been through maybe 3 different venues. Okay. It started out at Harling's upstairs.
That's right, on Main Street, right.
Yeah. And then it went from there to a little place right downstairs from Harling's. It was called the Embassy Bistro.
Sure.
And we played there for about a year and then moved it to BB's.
So the actual core of the players just shifted locations.
Yeah.
But you've been with them.
Right. And actually, from the very beginning of it to now, I'm the only original guy left.
Cool. And how long would you guess that was? Is that where I got the 25 years?
Well, it's been like 35 or 6 years.
Oh, yeah. So,
84.
So, yeah, not only can I not remember names, I can't remember the years account.
It started in 84, and of the original 5 guys, 2 of them have passed, and the other 2 are no longer performing.
Jay, when you go in and play, when you go to do that, because you're jamming to do that, do you still get a kick out of playing?
I love playing. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You mean
I still love doing it. Yeah.
On the way there, you're excited about, I get to go play.
Yeah. I mean, I'd play the guitar anyway, and if I actually get paid for it, that's like, life is good.
Yeah. Any of your kids musicians at all?
My oldest son plays. He's got a non-musical day job, but it does factor in. He is in AV, audiovisual. He works for a big audiovisual company and does installations and design and maintenance and stuff. He's actually built his own recording studio, and but he's not active professionally as a musician.
Yeah.
And my 2 oldest daughters are dancers, ballet and modern, and they have a school. It's called Kansas City Movement.
Yeah, sure.
And they have a
studio. I saw you had that T-shirt on the other day.
Yeah.
You were wearing that or sweatshirt.
They have a studio in Blue Springs.
Yeah.
And they specialize in teaching homeschoolers.
Oh, nice.
And they do an original ballet every other year in the summer. They write the ballet. They do all the choreography. And they were in a professional company for a while and toured as dancers. But, marriage and kids kind of puts a damper on that kind of career too.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so
age.
They in some ways, they've basically done the same thing I did. They still make a living in dance, but they're all local.
Sure. Which is, in itself, we talked about earlier,
right?
That's success.
Right.
I mean, when you get to make your living doing what you love, and whether it's guitar, dance, or comedy.
One of the things, that moment of clarity in 1985, one of the results of that was that I realized that I was not motivated by fame or money. I was motivated by the love of the instrument.
And at that point, is it's fair to say, because you also were married and had 2 kids at that moment, because you didn't have that drive before you got married to go, I'm just going on the road. I don't care.
Yeah. Is
that a fair question?
Yeah,
to
that's
ask?
part of it, I'm sure. That factored into it. But I've always loved the guitar and playing the guitar.
Right.
That whether I was making money with it or not.
Yeah.
And when I realized that was what gave me the freedom to go, oh, well, I would love teaching. I would love recording. I would love writing. Because if there's a guitar involved, then that's what motivates me.
Gotcha.
And so I quit chasing the carrot on the stick.
Gotcha. Sure.
I became unmanipulatable by the powers that be in the music industry.
You bet. Explain. I know what you're talking about, but explain to the people listening.
Well,
it's very alluring.
Nobody can come up to me and say, I'm going to make you a star, and cause me to sacrifice anything to get that.
Right. A star mean having an open studio to record your music, to go on the road, to be a celebrity.
I can get you a major label record deal, sign here.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hire you as a staff writer for my big time publishing company. Sign here.
If you moved to L.A.
Yeah.
And didn't that happen to you? Didn't they? I mean,
that's happened more than once.
They wanted you to move to Nashville.
I had someone, Music Row publisher, try and get me to move to Nashville.
successful. I mean, it was a big time.
Oh yeah, he'd placed tunes with George Strait and some big names, and he was interested in my music, wanting to publish my music, but the writing deal involved relocation, and I didn't. That was a deal killer for me.
So let's talk about the music business for those people listening and think, I have a guitar, or I'm gonna write songs, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna go to Nashville and do that. You got to get tied into the right people, and you got tied into the people that make the decisions of what happens.
Right. Well, it's all, who you know. It's like most other businesses. It's who you know.
But you had, for that guy to get a hold of you, as you say in the music business, you had the chops. You knew what you were doing.
I have every confidence that if I committed myself to it, I could achieve a pretty high level of success.
Sure.
But I wasn't willing to make the sacrifices necessary.
You got to go where they are, and that was in Nashville.
Yeah, I'd have to relocate. I'd have to be on the road all the time. That kind of stuff. And it's like
as a writer, you would have been. I mean, if you were working with them writing.
No, but the writing deal that he was that particular situation wasn't enough to live on. So I'm relocating to a new town. I'd have to find a place to teach. I'd be looking for gigs in a town teeming with monstrous musicians and not near enough clubs to play in.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And I don't know. I have to caveat everything with I don't know really how things are now.
Gotcha.
This was late 80s, 90s. And, music business has changed a lot. I mean, there are people that are achieving superstardom without a record label deal.
Because of the internet.
Yeah.
Because of the internet.
And TikTok and,
And what is that thing that can automatically keep them in tune?
Yeah, auto-tune.
Auto-tune.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people that are they're recording doing that.
Right.
And
in their bedroom.
In their bedroom.
Right.
And if they don't have that on the road, you're going to hear what they really sound like.
So I don't know, really, I'm not really that interested. I'm kind of too old and not interested in, trying to attain some kind of national prominence or anything.
So if you're a musician and you write music and you gotta go to where it is. Whether is that Nashville? Is that New York? Is it LA?
Nashville would be one of the main ones. I know quite a few people there.
Yeah.
And I've had some former students get into some pretty big time situations, and everybody says the same thing. You got to go where the people are. You got to go where the infrastructure is.
If you want to win the race, you got to go where the horses are.
Yeah,
you got to, right? Yeah. Whatever analogy you want to put in there. Because you had a student that we both know that went out to Los Angeles that that want to get in the music business, and boy, that's just a rude awakening when you go out there.
Yeah. He awakening. Said he was young. I mean, this guy had it all. He was young. He was good looking. He had talent.
Could he play?
Oh, yeah, he can play.
As a
matter of fact, a few years ago, he hired me for a gig.
Is that right?
Yeah, we played a duo together.
And he paid me. A former student.
Yeah. That's happened to me several times in the last few years.
It's a good teacher.
My former students are now hiring me as a sideman. That's a little bit of a, what do you call it? A role shift.
Yeah.
That it takes a little getting used to.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with it.
Yeah. That just shows what a great teacher you are. And they liked you. Okay, let's talk about that, because I think this is great stuff. The movie, what was that, Whiplash?
Yeah.
The movie Whiplash that J.K. Simmons played. Uh-huh. He played the drum teacher.
Right.
And he was on that kid. If you didn't see it, he was on that kid.
Right.
And was he hitting him?
There was some physical abuse in that movie.
In the movie, and you had a teacher here in Kansas City, John Elliott.
Oh, correct? Yeah, but he wasn't.
But he wasn't physical like that.
No.
But he
was tough.
He was tough. And explain what you mean by tough.
Well, I can see you have no idea what it is that you're doing, so why don't you put your guitar back in the case and go home? And come back next week, and maybe I'll give you the next lesson.
What? How old were you?
I don't know, 24, 25.
And so, what did you do, man?
I went, yes, sir.
You didn't say, no, I can figure that out, stay right here. He kicked you out.
No, and I didn't say, hey, I'm paying for the whole half hour. He just kept my money and sent me home. Because he had a year's waiting list. So there was a year's worth of people just waiting to get my slot. And I knew he was very capable of slamming the door and telling me not to come back. So I knew he had what I needed, and I just went, yes, sir.
So what did you do? So after that, you went home and did what?
I practiced the lesson so that wouldn't happen again next week. That was the first time, and one of the only times, I went in unprepared and just tried to BS my way through the lesson.
Yeah.
And no, there was no sandbagging, no slack. It was, that was the way he was.
And he made you a better musician.
Oh, immeasurably. That's the single best thing I ever did for my guitar playing was to study with that guy.
Gotcha. And was it just guitar? Did he teach other things besides
He taught
guitar?
everything. He was a piano player. He didn't play guitar at all. He was a jazz pianist and an arranger, and it was his arranging chops that allowed him to teach guitars. He didn't teach guitar. He called it the theory of harmony. And he could apply it to almost any instrument.
And this was something he came up himself.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, he originated it. It's a very unique approach.
And what's that story you told me? He was working on his next lesson plan. He had his back to you, and you were playing. Would you tell that story?
He would write out every lesson by hand. You would buy a book of blank staff paper, and he would write every lesson out by hand. So while you're playing your lesson, the basic default was you had to play the lesson of the week in every key, in every position, in 20 minutes or less. And that gave him 10 minutes to explain the next lesson and send you home. So while you're playing your lesson, he's sitting at a desk with his back to you, writing out the next lesson. And he would say, the alto voice in that chord should be A flat, you're playing A natural, and the pencil doesn't stop.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, and he's not even looking at you. He doesn't have to look at you.
Wow.
Because he's not dealing with technique or anything like that.
Just all what he hears.
It's like, are you playing what I need to hear? And he knew he had a really good idea of the limitations of the instrument, and he could tell that you were in this position or that position, I studied with him for 7 years, and maybe 2 or 3 times he spelled a chord that was impossible to play on the guitar, and so then he would cuss a little bit and go, okay, I'll revoice that chord.
Gotcha.
And there were times where he was spelling a chord, and I would kind of be hunting and pecking for something. I said, I don't think there's a D flat right there. He goes, oh no, it's right in there somewhere on that string or that string. And he'd be right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, did he play around Kansas City?
Oh yeah, he was a player.
He
was the house pianist at the Playboy Club for most of the time it was open. So he played with all the big name singers and musicians that were on the Playboy circuit.
Yeah.
He was active from the late 40s into the early 90s, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And the older he got, the less he played out. And I remember one lesson I went in, and he just, off the top of his head, he said, I will never play another nightclub again as long as I live. It's just too stupid. And he took on a student or two after that. I think Eldar, the jazz pianist Eldar, was a little kid, came here from Russia, a prodigy, and studied with John at his house after John's retirement. Eldar's parents, I think, begged John to take him on, so he was Eldar was one of John's retirement projects.
Is that something in all your experience now, Jay, is that a gift? Is that something you're born with? What John did? Obviously, you have to work to get to that point and understand the whole language of music.
Yeah.
But is that something that you're just born with, if you will?
I am not a big believer in talent.
Explain.
My definition of talent is the drive or the motivation, wherever it comes from, to do the work.
Say that again, please.
It's the drive or the motivation to do the work. Most people don't have the drive or the motivation to do the work that it takes to get really good on a musical instrument to a pro level. Now, there's a lot of guys that aren't very good that make gazillions of dollars. There's an element in the music business where all you have to be is good enough. And the variables to success are other than how good you are. I mean, you can be really good and be totally unsuccessful. You know, you have to have a look, you have to have a shtick, you have to have an identifying something, you know, a sound. And so you have to be good enough. And beyond that, you have to have other things. There are other skill sets involved.
To be a player and to be talented like you're talking about is really only appreciated basically by other musicians.
Yeah, you know, when I was studying classical guitar at the Conservatory of Music with Douglas Neat, he said that he didn't buy into the concept of talent. It was all mechanical. And you had to program your brain. You had to do the reps. Repetition programs the brain. Repetition is like writing code for the brain, you know. And once you have the code written, your brain will execute the program flawlessly every time.
Interesting.
And,
Interesting.
I think that you know, I think sometimes successful musicians, famous, you know, we're talking about success in terms of fame and money here.
Yes. Okay.
They will present a facade of talent like it's a gift that they woke up with or they were born with or whatever.
Sure.
As a PR strategy or a PR move.
You bet, because they got to sell it.
Yeah.
They got to sell it.
And what they don't talk about is the complete obsessive practicing that they did, whether they were formally trained or not. The formal training isn't always necessary. I mean, you know, if you play your guitar 10 hours a day, you're going to get better no matter what.
Yeah. You know, you remind me of a story I heard Jimmy Buffett talking about. They interviewed him on 60 Minutes, and they said, how do you explain your success? He goes, my success is not success, it's a phenomena. He said, I can barely play the guitar, I can write some nice tunes, and I can barely sing. They decided I was popular, not me.
Right.
He said, man, I'm just a guy up there playing music in a Hawaiian shirt and being goofy. And he said, I remember looking out over the audience, and all these people had parrot hats on and Hawaiian shirts, and I went off stage and said to my manager, you know, we should sell that. We should sell that stuff. And, you know, Margaritaville, and look at how many people made Margaritaville pop. And so that really goes to what you say. They branded him, and they do that where somebody we talked about the other day, if people remember George Benson, you know, that you just said he was a hell of a guitar player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he starts singing, and then we know George Benson is the guy that sings while he plays the guitar.
Right.
So, but he had years up to that point of obscurity, if you will, where nobody knew George Benson except in the jazz world.
Right.
Is the high too in playing, when you're going to a jam or something, the high is what's happening between the musicians?
Yes.
What's happening between the musicians, you can only be a musician to understand what's
There's
happening.
a whole dimension there that most, 99.9% of the audience is not aware of. Yeah, there's a whole dimension of stuff going on stage between the musicians, especially in a genre like jazz or blues where there's a lot of improvisation going on.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing that, you have to be tuned into each other. You know what the other guy's playing, what's going on. So yeah, especially if I'm not the front man. Okay, there are situations that I play where I'm the front man. I have to sing, I have to patter with the crowd, I have to think about what's the demographic out there, what tunes should I be doing, that kind of thing. If I'm not the front man, 95% of my awareness or focus is on the other musicians.
Gotcha. When you're doing that, I heard Pat Metheny talk about what you're saying, and if I could just add to that what he was saying, he said he writes tunes so they can improvise. There's a section.
They're
everybody
vehicles for improvisation.
That's all they are. He said, so we do that, and he said that's why some players don't last very long with me on the road, because I demand them. And he said, I demanded. He said, I'm the only guy to ever talk back to Jocko and go, no, don't do that, do this.
Yeah.
And he said he respected me enough to do that.
Uh-huh.
But he said, I'm not up there playing. I'm up there listening as a musician. He said, I'm just listening, and I'll let everything else take over. Like you said, all the coding you put in your brain.
Right.
I'm just adding what you just said in there. But he said, you're just listening. Of course, I guess when a group like those guys, they're not really thinking, they're just playing. They're not really thinking, I need to play this tune for the audience.
Right.
Like when you're a front man and you have a bar or something like that, man, there's a whole different head going on up there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I play several solo gigs a month where I have to be the center of attention.
Do you like that?
I can switch that on and off. If I have to be a front man, then I can flip a little switch in my brain into my narcissism mode, Yeah. And I talk, you learn things like if you're playing a restaurant, and there's a bunch of little kids, if you cater to the little kids, I'm going to do this song from SpongeBob SquarePants, or I'm going to do this song from the latest Disney movie or whatever, and you cater to these little kids, and, you dance really good in that chair, whatever. You'll get more tips from mom and dad.
Yeah.
And
that's your focus.
Yeah. If I'm not the front man, I don't think about that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
But I would be just as happy being the sideman guitar player standing at the back of the stage.
You would be just as happy doing that.
Yeah. The reason that I'm a front man and that I sing is because it gets me more gigs. I figured that out at a pretty young age. The monster guitar player is going to lose the gig to the mediocre guitar player who can sing.
Okay, let's talk about you actually up there playing. I heard this too, that the drummer the drummer's leading the whole thing when you guys are playing. If you have a drummer that's pushing you guys, to play, just enough that you're playing, but a drummer can really drag down the whole group.
Well, yeah, drummers are important. I really think the most important player in a band situation is the bass player.
Because?
Well, if you have a good bass player and a good drummer, everybody else can be not all that great, and it'll still sound good.
Okay.
But if you have a bunch of monster musicians and a bad bass player, there's no way
it's gonna
work.
Is that right?
You got your foundation is shaky.
Yeah. That was, I just remember being a big fan of Tower of Power. The Tower of Power, they said, that Emilio, the leader, said, that's what drove us all the years was Garibaldi on drums and Rocco on bass.
Yep.
They just had this natural synthesis
that
just kept the band moving. We're almost trying to keep up with them.
Yeah.
He said that's what's happening. They're driving it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. the bass player and the drummer are the foundation of the whole thing, and the rest of it, you can have a mediocre guitar player, but if the bass player and the drummer are locked in and it's solid, it's going to be all right.
So if you're somebody like Garth Brooks, you're going on the road, you're going to make damn sure you got a fine drummer and a fine bass player that's moving that band nonstop. I mean, that's primarily the guys that go on the road to do that. They got to have that.
I have a friend, he's actually a former student too, that he's one of those Nashville guys, and he played for me. I don't think the situation has changed, but he played for many years in Florida Georgia line. And he told me one time, for a while they were the biggest band in the world. He said when he was taking lessons from me, they hadn't broke yet. They were still touring in a van and a Yjhtl trailer.
Oh man.
I could tell a lot of stories about all that. But anyway, he sent me I think it was a tweet. I can't remember what the format was, but he sent me a picture. It was after they hit big, real soon after they hit big, and it was a picture of a selfie of him and the band in a private jet. And he said, record label sent a private jet to fly the band from Atlanta to L.A. for the CMA Awards. Life does not suck right now. Anyway, he told me, when you audition for a band like that, the audition lasts about 10 minutes. And then they go out to dinner for 3 hours. And the person who gets the gig gets it on the basis of the dinner. All the audition does is verify, okay, this guy's good enough.
He can play.
Yeah. And the rest of it is, can we get along with this guy for 8 months out of the year in a tour bus?
Man.
So his phrase was, the hang is the thing. The hang is the thing.
The hang is the thing.
We know you're good enough. We know you're good.
God, that's a great story. I want to talk to you about how your teaching now is moving to what John Elliott taught you.
Right.
What you're doing. That's what we wanted to get to.
Yeah, that was my agenda.
Yeah, and I remembered that right before I asked you. So let's talk about your agenda.
See, that's my autism. That's my single focus. That's what I'm doing now, man. That's all I think about.
And I'm here to make you look good, brother. So talk about that. Let's go. What is that?
Okay, well, the content of what John taught. Okay.
So the people listening, just to go back, so you know, John Elliott was your teacher, the guy that said, leave, come back, and don't, that guy.
Yeah. John was kind of all paths led to John Elliott if you were interested in jazz and you were in Kansas City. Okay. From the late 40s through the early 90s, he basically taught anybody who's anybody and a lot of people who are nobody in the jazz world. In or from Kansas City, including Pat Metheny.
And including the people that brought their kid from Russia to study with him. So I'm guessing people came in from out of town to study with him as well, if they could get in.
Yeah, that happened. Carn Allison studied with him.
The famous jazz singer, right?
Yeah. The list is in. Bobby Watson studied with him. All the jazz guitar players that are 50-something and older, Danny Embry, Rod Fleeman, Steve Cardenas.
Joe Cartwright.
Joe Cartwright studied with him. Yeah, so he was the guru, for decades. And I got my first, or the early 90s, I got my first computer, Windows 3.1.
Sure.
And I started trying to think, how can I get this stuff into a computer? Because I was teaching like John did. He was my model. He was my model in terms of content. He was not my model in terms of assholery. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
There's a legitimate reason to teach the way he did, and I get it. he was willing to plow through 2 or 3 dozen students to find one, who was 120% committed. So after a while of doing it that way, you wind up with this massive load of totally committed students. And you have a very high percentage of monster players issuing forth from your teaching studio year after year after year after year.
Gotcha.
It takes a period of time to build that up. And there's a lot of people that are unhappy with you, because you're not necessarily a nice guy.
You hurt my feelings.
Yeah, you hurt my feelings. He hurt my feelings more than once. But I can take that. You know why? Because I know where I come from. I know who I am.
Gets brought back to the family every time. Every time.
Yeah. And I have that strength of being, strength of self. And go ahead, hurt my feelings. I'm still going to study with you. I don't care.
And you learned that in your family, as you said.
Yeah, and I'm willing to take whatever he dished out because I knew he had what I needed.
So if you have parents, and pardon me just for a second. So if you have parents, and they call them snowflakes now, but if you have a parent go, that's okay, honey, you tried really hard. Maybe you ought to go back and we'll find. I mean, when you do that, you lose that drive of, I'll show that asshole.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
You're not scaring me off. I mean, and really what it takes to stay in the music business, to stay in the entertainment business, you have to have that because, man, if you can't handle rejection or insecurity, you're screwed.
Oh, yeah.
You're screwed.
It's 99% rejection.
Yes.
One time I had a band leader. I won't name him or identify him, but he called me and was interested in hiring me, in his band. So he said, meet me for lunch tomorrow. So we met for lunch. We talked. He hired me. And as we were leaving, he said, by the way, I just want you to know you're not my first choice. And I thought to myself, why would you say that? I don't know why you would say that, other than just he's brutally honest and unfiltered, which is one of the things I like about him.
Yeah.
And I just looked at him and I said, well, I'll change your mind about that.
Nice.
And I still work with this guy, 30 years later.
See?
And when he calls me and says, hey, man, can you do a gig on such and such a date? I go, well, yeah, I could. Am I your first choice? And he'll say, no, but you're my best choice.
Oh, that's a great
But
story.
that kind of response on my part, I'll change your mind about that.
Yeah.
That comes from sense of self.
Gotcha. Because see, as a smart-ass comedian, if a guy would have said to me, you're not my first choice, I go, well, quite frankly, you weren't mine either. But that gets into a back and forth play. And
so that was why I could deal with John.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of painting a bad picture.
Back to John. That was back to John.
He was also very wonderful and very supportive. I got behind in my payments. He understood. He understood what it's like to be a working musician, and get behind, and he tolerated it for a while.
Didn't Danny Embry say it the best when he told
Danny Embry is the guy that referred me to him, and when he said, you need to study with John, he's a little tough, but it's worth it. That was the understatement of the century.
So what you're doing now, to get back to what you're doing.
Right. So in the early 90s, long story short.
What's amazing to this about Jay right now is that I'm keeping somebody else on track because I'm always going off on track. So it's amazing.
What does that say about me?
What does that? Go ahead, man. Squirrel. This is fun. This is a blast. I'm having a blast with this podcast.
Okay, so
I'm surprised I remembered your name.
I figured out Windows 3.1. I figured out how to get this content I taught like John did. I wrote every lesson out by hand, one page at a time. It's impossible for the student to look ahead. You have to master this page before I give you the next one. That kind of approach. Because I realized that's the best way to teach for the student's sake, you know. And so I figured out how to get this stuff into a computer so I could print out pages instead of writing them out by hand.
Gotcha.
And then after a while, and I would keep, you know, a cache of, I would go to Kinko's, the local print shop or whatever, and you know, print out 100 pages of something, you know, and I would keep stock. I would keep a stock. I had shelves in my teaching studio of all the pages, you know. And then I realized I was spending, you know, several $100s a year in printing costs, and I thought maybe I should just print up a book. And then I could sell the book to my students and make a little money instead of spending money on printing,
sure,
you know, on these, and I could make a little bit of profit on them. So I did that. And then, and you know, 2/3 of this book was basically John's material.
Gotcha.
And then I unsolicited on my part, I became aware that there were several teachers using my book in their teaching activities. I had a friend and a fan who managed a music store that talked me into putting some of my books in the store on consignment. And then I found out some of the teachers in this store were using my book.
How do you stop it?
Well, I realized you can't.
Gotcha.
I mean, already somebody in Singapore was printing up bootleg copies of this book. I became aware pretty, you know, within a year after I first published the book. So after that, I just made sure that every page of the book had my name and my website address on it. Free advertising, you know? So if somebody's going to copy the book, they're copying, and if anybody, you know, buys a bootleg copy, they're going to wind up on my website.
Gotcha.
So other teachers started using the book, and I'm thinking to myself, man, I don't want John to find this out from somebody else. He needs to find this out from me, that I have this book, and it's being sold, and it's got his stuff in it.
Hey, you didn't ask him before you made the book?
No. See, legally, you can't copyright a concept. You copyright a specific expression of a concept.
Okay.
That's what my book was.
Okay.
Okay? So legally, I don't owe him anything.
But you know where you got the idea from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I credit him in the foreword to the book.
Okay.
I've always given John his due on what I teach.
Right.
I go, it's John Elliott. It's coming from John Elliott. I mean, you know, 1/3 of it is my stuff, but my stuff is designed to dovetail with his stuff.
Oh, so now, before you did it, I'm curious, Jay, before the book went out, did you ever go in and ask him for his blessing that you were going to do this?
No, that happened later.
Okay, that's what you were getting
so
to.
Once the book got out there, and the book was originally just, I intended to sell the book to my students, and that was it. And then other teachers started using it. And that's when I went, okay, this is getting out of control.
Right.
You know? So I called up John and I said, look, man, I have this book that I wrote and I use it in my teaching, and there's some other teachers that have started to use it, and it has a lot of your stuff in it. And I would like you to take a look at it and tell me what you think. And personally, I was just wanting resolution of one kind or another. Either he would get mad and scream and yell at him that I was plagiarizing him, or he would give me his blessing. But I didn't want him to find out from somebody else.
Of course.
And I didn't want him to pass away. And as it turned out, this was, 15 years before he passed away. But I didn't want him to pass away without knowing what he thought, because I respect him too much, So he goes, He goes, yeah, drop a copy in the mail. And I knew he was going to do that. I said, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring a copy to you myself because I have a son that's named after you. And his other two brothers are named after their grandfathers, but he's never met the man that he's named after, and he's been asking me about it. And I'd like to bring him to meet you. So
smooth move, man.
Yeah. Which was all true.
Yeah.
But I was using it, because I wanted to be there. I wanted to be there in person and see his reaction and so on. He was real quiet for a minute. He goes, I'd be happy to meet him. Bring him on over. And this was my son, Nathan. His middle name is Elliot. I named him after John. Nathan was about 9. And so we went over there. And John sat down at the kitchen table with my book for like an hour. He looked at every page. He found 3 or 4 typos. I wasn't expecting that. And he said, well, I'm glad somebody has finally codified this material for the guitar.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, that's all I wanted,
Yeah.
And I offered him a check every quarter based on book sales. He turned it down. I offered to share the copyright with him, and he turned that down. So I went, okay.
Yeah.
So I built up a little network of teachers in different cities across the country that were using my books, and I would sell the books to the teacher at wholesale, and they could sell them to retail to their students, and everybody makes a little money and
Sure.
so on. The book sales started declining in the 2000s, along with the CD sales and whatnot with the rise of the internet, right? So that stuff started going away. So long story short, I created masterguitarschool.com, which is my teaching website. And I have been reformatting and redoing the book for the internet environment, which is a self-teaching kind of thing. The lessons have to be self-contained. The book was not designed to be self-teaching. It requires a qualified instructor. But the internet is not that way. And, I'm after thousands and tens of thousands of subscribers. So I can't personally teach, all that.
Sure.
So I can't just reformat the book as a PDF and throw it up there. It's disservice to the book. It's a disservice to John. And so I'm redesigning, I'm rewriting everything, shooting demonstration videos and all that kind of stuff. And I'm about halfway through the method right now. It's going to take years.
Okay, how if people want to keep up on this, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, just go to masterguitarschool.com.
That's easy to remember.
Yeah. Masterguitarschool.com, and you can sign up as a site member for absolutely nothing. It's totally free. As a site member, you get a monthly newsletter that usually has a free lesson. I write a blog every week. Many of the blogs have free lessons in them. And the lessons consist of, explanatory text, fretboard diagrams, music notation, and videos.
Gotcha.
And there are 10 units or chapters to the book, and I am working right now on unit 7 out of 10. And all the previous units, you can buy them and download them. If you're a site member, you can get them way cheap,
Gotcha.
So and right now I have about 4,000 people on an email list, and I have about 1,500 site members. And the site members are fairly engaged. About 20% of them are, open up all the emails, click on links, and about 5 or 6% of the site members will purchase, so they're engaged. And my goal is to, have a personal relationship with the people that are very engaged. And the list is still small enough that I can easily do that. There are some of those people, I recognize their names when they send me an email, And I give site members free time if they have questions or need clarification or need help. I will respond to emails. I'll even do a short, Skype or FaceTime consult, whatever.
Would you ever take that approach that John took with certain students? Do you think that that's in you, or you would do that with certain students?
No, yeah, I understand the question you're asking, and that's a very good question, and I consciously made a decision that I couldn't be that way. That
was that just John, by the way?
That was just John.
Okay.
Yeah, he was very serious about the music and about the teaching, and if you weren't interested in total commitment, he wasn't interested in teaching you.
Sure.
You know?
But now, what about you? Can you tell if someone isn't total commitment? Will you keep teaching them?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Because there are many other legitimate, valid reasons to take guitar lessons other than I want to be a pro.
What are those?
Well, therapeutic value. I've had referrals from physical therapists and doctors for people that have had brain injuries or Alzheimer's or dementia of some kind. Music lessons are beneficial to those kinds of people.
Gotcha.
I have all kinds of things happen because of a music lesson that have nothing to do with the music. For instance, I had a woman about 70 years old start taking lessons from me. The reason that I was given was that she played piano already, and she wanted to play guitar, and she wanted to be able to get better on the guitar so she could play the guitar in her church, right? So, and she was about 70, I guess. And I figured out really quick that the real reason was she was a recent widow. Her husband had died. She was trying to find things to do, right? And so I gave her lessons for a while, and she just kind of glommed onto me. And I had her over for Sunday dinner to meet my wife and kids, and she would come out to hear me play. And she was very well off. Her husband, they were millionaires. Her husband had $1 million garage door business, but I learned all kinds of things about her. She and her husband started this garage door business during the Great Depression. They lived in a trailer in Wyandotte County with no indoor plumbing, no heat. And they built this garage door business from the ground up into $1 million business. And her husband died, so he had $1 million life insurance policy, and she got the proceeds from the sale of the business. She was, would buy a new Cadillac every other year, but she would quibble over $10 out of a $100 purchase. That's Great Depression.
That's right. Mentality. Yes,
mentality.
It is.
Right.
Yeah.
And she loved me, and she would give me very generous checks on my birthday and for Christmas and stuff. And when she was, how are the kids, blah, 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 blah. And she was, so after a while, at the point she quit her lessons. When she quit her lessons, she was actually in tears. Oh, I know you've got all those kids, you need the money. And I go, it's okay. I've got a waiting list. Your slot will be filled next week. I've enjoyed teaching you and getting to know you and all that. So about I'd say 10 years later, I was playing a gig, and she showed up at this gig. I hadn't seen her for like or heard from her for like 10 years. And she was like, I was like, oh, it's great to see you. I was just thinking about you the other day, and she goes, well, it's good to see you too. And I can tell you're working too much. You need to slow down or you're not going to get them kids to grow up. That's what killed my husband, Oh,
wow.
He worked himself to death. And at the time, I had started a schedule that had me working 70 to 80 hours a week.
Whoa.
And I said, well, I am working a lot, but I'm taking a vacation every quarter, a week off, and, I'll manage. But it's just something that I got to do, That was, 6 years later, I collapsed from sleep deprivation and chronic exhaustion. So she nailed me right at the beginning, right? Wow. So I was like, well, damn, she was right.
Yeah.
So about 15 years after that, I was playing at Harling's one Saturday afternoon, and in she walks. And I was like, I was just thinking about you the other day, wondering if you were still alive. And she was like, I'm 95 years old, and I walked up them steps by myself, And I said, well, it's great to see you, And we sat and talked and caught up, She was asking about the kids, how the kids turned out, you still married, blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, it was a wonderful little kind of homecoming,
Yeah.
And she was there with a grandson. A grandson had brought her up, and I had him take a picture of us. And that was on Saturday. And then the following Friday, I got a phone call from a person who said, Irene was her name, passed away in her sleep last night. And I don't know who you are, but your business card was on her kitchen table, and I thought you would like to know.
Wow.
And I went to the visitation, and that last picture that had been taken of her at Harling's was the picture that they were using for her memorial service.
Wow.
Now,
I'm getting goosebumps.
That was because
beautiful.
I gave an old lady guitar lessons, right? With no agenda about how good she was going to be. And I could tell stories upon stories upon stories like that over the years of people who took lessons. It was a very, to me, it's just another guitar lesson, I've had grown men come up to me and say, dude, you changed my life. I'm like, what? Like, I took lessons from you, man. You changed my life. And I'm like, how old were you? Oh, I was, 14. And I'm like, and now you're 35 and I'm supposed to recognize you. But to me, I was just another kid, just another kid I was giving guitar lessons to. But to them, it was something super significant. You run into the same thing as a performer.
Absolutely.
I run into the same thing as a performer in a nightclubs. I have people come up to me and tell me how much I helped them through some dark period of their life because they would come in and to hear me play night after night. I had no idea. It's just another gig.
Yeah.
But we affect people, in ways that we have no clue about. And if I only taught lessons because I wanted to produce pro musicians, I would be steamrolling over those people.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Listen, I've been doing this long enough. I can't top that story. I can't.
I think on some kind of subconscious level, that old woman came up there to say goodbye to me.
Yeah.
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 She died 6 days later.
You just, and Jay, I've just known you in the past 3 days and talking to you, but this whole thing about the guitar comes from your soul. It comes from your heart. Mm-hmm. I'm just guessing when you teach people that's got to come through because you have that love for that guitar.
Yeah.
You have that love for your guitar.
It just is what it is, I don't try to manufacture anything. I teach John's method because that method worked for me. You know, it made me a better guitar player. And so that's what I want for my students, whether they become pros. I mean, I've had lots of students become pros, you know, but that's not the only reason to take guitar lessons or to teach guitar lessons. So,
you know, there's a humor scene that comes into my mind. The Jack Nicholson, you know,
Yeah.
And that was, remember that movie? And he goes, "You just make me want to be a better man."
Yeah, that was a great line.
And people come to you, "You just want to make me a better guitar player."
Yeah, yeah. And I become a better person by organic osmosis.
Isn't that something? Man, thanks for your time.
Sure.
Appreciate it. And Andrew, thank you for correcting me. Your name is, you patiently said.
She said, make sure he doesn't ask me to talk.
Yeah, because when we came up with, I said, "Man, I should have brought a third mic," and you went, "No, dude." So, but you were with us in spirit. Jay, thanks so much. I'm going to put up a Master
Guitar School
to get a hold of you.
Yeah.
If you want to know how to, another, can they get a hold of you? Find out where you're playing.
Sure. You can get there from there. I have another website. It's just called masterguitar.com. That has everything else other than the teaching on it. It has my performance schedule, gig videos, all that kind of stuff, pictures.
And Jay, I got to just say one thing. You make me want to be a better podcaster. See you next time, folks. Get a hold of Jay and get that guitar lesson.